I want to speak to you about chapter 11 of the book of Romans. So if you have your Bibles there, please, you'll want to open it in Romans chapter 11. Keep it open there because we will be touching on that chapter at the conference. How was it formed? The church in Rome. How was the church in Rome formed? There is no solid historical evidence of how the church was formed in Rome, to which Paul writes this letter. Most likely, this church emerged, this community emerged at the beginning as a result of what happened on Pentecost. We are going to try to set the context of the world of that time. When this community emerged in Rome, most Jews did not live in Israel during the days of Jesus. Most Jews lived outside Israel in the days of Jesus. Therefore, there were Jews living in Rome, and there were Jews living in Ephesus. There were Jews living in Alexandria, Jews living in Babylon, Jews living in Athens, etc. However, there are three feasts in the Bible. From the festive cycle of the Torah, the scripture, there are three feasts in the Bible that can only be sanctified in Jerusalem. At that time, the temple was standing. Therefore, when these three festivals arrived, Shalosh Regalim, or the pilgrimage festivals, all the Jews throughout the Roman Empire traveled to Jerusalem and were in Jerusalem to celebrate these holidays, especially the Feast of Passover or Pesach, the festival of Shavuot or Pentecost, and the festival of Sukkot or Tabernacles. Of course, there were other festivals. There was the feast of Rosh Hashanah. There was the feast of Yom Kippur. There were other feasts. But those three were mandatory and only sanctified in Jerusalem. Consequently, on this Pentecost feast, described in chapter 2 of the Acts of the Apostles, we found a huge number of Jewish people present in Jerusalem. When that takes place, that wind that arrived filled that house, all the events that happened there. Thousands of Jews, 3,000 in total, responded to the speech that day of the Apostle Peter and recognized that Yeshua was the Messiah. When they returned to their communities from where they had come, among which was Rome, they spoke to other Jews about their experience, and eventually a Jewish community was formed in Rome. What happened was that many Gentiles in that era also accepted the grandeur and simplicity of the Jewish synagogue, and they attended Jewish synagogues and were learning a lot about the God of Israel. Non-Jews at that time, they used to visit the Jewish synagogue and are learning about the God of Israel in the Jewish synagogues with Jewish teachers. The writing of the Torah service on Saturday was done in Hebrew but translated to the language of the visitors. There was always a translator. There was always someone who delivered the message to the vernacular language of those who were attending. Many of them were Gentiles. They attended the synagogue as guests, as friends, and many of them converted to the God of Israel without becoming Jewish. But they converted to the God of Israel. These non-Jews who converted to the God of Israel are known as righteous among the nations. Whenever you read in the New Testament, righteous among the nations, it refers to non-Jews who abandoned their idols and converted to the God of Israel, but did not become Jews. They simply remained as righteous people from the nations. For example, in chapter 10, it actually happens there Cornelius is said to be a righteous person. Okay, he prayed to God and gave alms, etc., a righteous man. Cornelius the just, what does that mean? That Cornelius having experienced the greatness of the God of Israel, was convinced that the God of Israel was the only true God and served him like a righteous among the nations. And this happened in all synagogues, both inside and outside of Israel. This way, the community of Jewish believers in Yeshua as the Messiah in Rome also received visits from many Gentiles who converted to the God of Israel in Rome, the capital of the Roman Empire, from the year 41 to the year 52, in the time of Tiberius, one of the emperors, Tiberius Claudius, an imperial edict was issued. It was written that all the Jews, they weren't welcome in Rome, they were expelled from Rome, and a decree was signed. All the Jews had to leave Rome. The emperor didn't want Jews in Rome. As simple as that. All the Jewish people had to pack their bags, take their belongings, and leave Rome, or they would face death. What happened then to the community formed by Jewish believers in Yeshua? And by righteous people from the nations in the community of Rome, it was left without Jews. It was left without the Jewish teachers. If you go, for example, to chapter 18 of the Acts of the Apostles, it's interesting how Paul finds himself in Corinth with Aquila and Priscilla, who had just arrived from Rome because of the expulsion edict from Emperor Claudius. When the Jews are expelled from Rome, the Jewish teachers have to leave Rome. The rabbis have to leave Rome. Who will lead the community? The righteous of the nations. The righteous among the nations remain at the forefront of the community. The void, the absence of the Jew, the Jewish teacher, the Jewish leaders. The Jewish members who had to leave Rome are now replaced by non-Jewish believers. In that way, community remains in the synagogues of Rome too without Jews, but with the presence of righteous from the nations. These righteous among the nations had learned about the God of Israel, had learned about the law of Moses, had learned about the biblical festivals. They had learned everything that is spoken in a synagogue. They knew this. They were familiar with it because they attended every Shabbat, every Saturday. How many are with me so far? When that Jewish void, it is filled by the new Gentile leadership. Certain things happen there that are the ones that cause, among others, for Paul to write this letter. What was happening in the community? In Rome, now led and formed exclusively by Gentiles, former Gentiles from the nations. Two important facts were created. Number one, why is this happening with the Jews? Why such hatred towards the Jews? How can we explain that God is treating the Jews this way? While for us, so far, they leave us alone.
He says, could it be?
Is it because they did not accept the Messiah as a people that God is treating them this way? That was the first thing that started circulating there. The second thing that started circulating there in Rome was this. Why are there fewer and fewer Jews?
Recognize Jesus as the Messiah, and more non-Jews acknowledge him as such?
The answer they gave to this question is surely because God has rejected the Jewish people, and now he has replaced us with us. Now we are the new Israel. And that concept, that explanation of what was happening, reached the ears of the Apostle Pablo. So he writes this letter to the Romans to explain to the non-Jewish believers what was really happening. And that's precisely the reason why we are gathered here today. How many are with me so far? Are you with me here? Very well. I know that some of you might already be hungry and want to go eat a good Uruguayan steak. But let's make an effort and tell your stomach to be calm, because you're going to eat soon. Okay?
What happened? How does Paul explain this? Paul says, look, has God rejected his people?
What is the answer that Paul gives? Absolutely not. In no way has God rejected his people. Why does Pablo ask that question? Pablo asks that question because that's exactly what they are thinking. To give an explanation of what was happening with the Jewish people. Second question that Paul asks in this chapter 11, very important, in Romans chapter 11, is this. Did the people of Israel stumble to fall? Paul, in no way the Jews have not stumbled to fall. So how do we explain that more and more Gentiles believe and fewer Jews do not believe that Jesus is the Messiah? How do we explain it? Paul says the way you are explaining it is wrong. I'm going to reveal a mystery that we have here. There is an extraordinary mystery that you cannot ignore, and the mystery is this. The partial hardening of the Jewish people it's not something that has taken God by surprise. It is something that is conceived in God's redemption plans to open up a space so that the Gentiles can also come to salvations. In other words, if the nation of Israel, if the rulers of Israel in those days, if the Sanhedrin, if the Jewish Congress of those days,
To Annas, Caiaphas, and all those leaders,
they would have recognized that Jesus is the Messiah, the Messianic age would have been established in Israel, but the world would have been left out. So what happened? God put an obstacle for the Jewish people. You guys really like soccer, right? I've been told that here they even kill. You have to be very careful, eh? You can't mess with football, right? Imagine a soccer game. We Jews have the ball in our hand. We made a move. We have the goal set. And when we are about to shoot, they trip us and we fall, and the ball doesn't go in. Exactly the same thing happened with the Jewish people. God, through mysteries that I will show you in a moment, He hid from the Jewish people the messianic identity of Yeshua. He revealed it only to a few with the aim of giving an opportunity for the world to know the God of Israel and be saved. Then Paul says what is happening to the Jewish people does not mean what you are thinking. It is not that God has rejected the Jewish people. It is not that God has forgotten the Jewish people. It is not that you are the new Israel, substituting the Jewish people.
isn't it a mystery of redemption by which God has hidden the image of Jesus as Messiah for a time from
His own people, so that you can come to know the God of Israel? And then to illustrate that, the apostle uses the analogy of two olive trees. And that is exactly why I asked for us to have these two trees here. Of course, this is not an olive, eh? I don't think it even looks like it. But with the permission of everyone's imagination, let's imagine this is an olive tree. Paul says there is a natural olive tree, and there is a wild olive tree. There is an olive tree that is wild. This will be the wild olive tree for the purpose of the class. Which olive tree is this? The natural olive tree? Who is the natural olive tree? Israel. Israel is the natural olive tree. It is an olive tree that has been cared for by God. It is an olive tree that has specs. It is an olive tree that has promises. It is an olive tree that has alliances. It is an olive tree that is based on a contract between the God of Israel and the people of Israel. Are you with me so far? That olive tree that has been cultivated, that is full of prophets. That olive tree that is full of words. The book that is full of revelation. That olive tree that is full of promises.
That is
the Israel of God.
Who holds that olive tree? God Himself. What is the concept of God here? God Himself revealed it. Here there's nothing dirty. Here there's nothing pagan. Here everything is a revelation from heaven. We now have a natural olive tree. Wild, which is this one I have to my left. This wild olive tree represents the nations of the world. What is the god of this olive tree? The idols. How is this olive tree sustained? Paganism. There's sorcery here. There are lies here. Here there is corruption. Here there is polytheism. Here is Zeus, Jupiter,
Elegua. And the rest of the gods of the nations here is how that olive tree sustained. Oh, it's due to that enchanting, idolatrous influence which comes from its own root. That's why it's called wild olive tree.
And what did God do? God put in temporary suspension to the Jewish people to give an opportunity for the message of redemption to reach here. Pablo says this is a very, very, very powerful word, says Pablo, that somehow the message of redemption that arrived here due to the partial hardening of the Jewish people opened the time window for the message to reach the Gentiles. We don't know how the message reached you, but it did. We don't know how it got to you, but it did. We don't know if someone spoke to you. We don't know if someone handed you a Bible. We don't know if someone, through a radio program, television, a tract, we don't know how, but the word reached you. You were here, and you received the word in your hearts. What does Pablo say happened? Pablo says that God took you from here. He took you from here and placed you there. Pablo says, if you being a natural olive, you were grafted unnaturally among the branches. Do not boast against the branches, but fear. Because it is not you who supports. This tree is the root that supports you. Do you understand what we're talking about? So what did the Spirit of the living God do when you received the word? You who were here, what did it do with you? He took you from here, and where did He put you? Here. And who is here? Abraham is here.
Isaac is here. Here is
Moses. Here is Isaiah. Here are the prophets. Here is the Messiah. Here is the Apostle Paul here. The Apostle Peter. Here are the apostles of the Lord. Here are the people of God. What's your name, Hugo? One day you were here, and the word reached your heart. You received it, right? And what did God do with you? He left you here. What did He do? Did He remove you? And where did He put you? So where are you now? On this side, where do you belong now?
you belong to the natural olive. And what's your name? Rosanna. Where were you?
You were here, right? And when you received the words, God left you here. What did he do? He took you out of here. Where did he put you? He put you here, right? I'm going to explain something very important. Paul says this grafting miracle is against nature. I'm going to explain that. It's very important to understand this. Why is it against nature?